Good morning, everybody. We are going to try and get through the last of our slides today because we are looking at an exam the beginning of next week. So let's hop right to it so we can get everything finished up as well as finishing up your notebooks. We left off on body composition and weight control. So right now, what you really need to think about is that we are thinking of gains and losses because body composition and weight control doesn't just mean that we're trying to lose weight. It could mean that we're trying to gain weight. We need to make sure that we've got a really educated response to this. We're not trying to do really unhealthy weight loss choices versus really unhealthy weight gain options. Okay, so most of the time, this is going to come down to not necessarily our workouts, but the discipline we have with the kinds of foods and the amount of food that we're taking in. Now, your ideal body weight, it's age related. There's height and weight requirements. Typically, though, it's not very accurate, especially when we think about something like BMI, because they don't take into account muscle density, bone weight, different body types. They don't take into account those things. So there are some more healthy ways to do body composition, and we're going to talk about a few types of those. Now, your overall general health as well as your athletic performance can be super, super good indicators as far as are you in appropriate body composition. Like we just said, there are fat versus non-fat components of the body, bones, muscle, organs versus fat. Now, there is also non-fat or lean tissue. So this is typically that what we want to have more of is that muscle and tendon as far as our weight is concerned. So what body composition actually is the relationship between fat tissue and that lean body tissue. For women, typically it's 20 to 25% fat. Men is typically 12 to 15. That's on average. Okay. Now, we've mentioned this before. Men should not fall below 3% and 12% for females. Remember, you need padding for your internal organs. You need to be able to keep them at the proper temperature, to keep them at homeostasis. And with women, it has to do with reproduction and being able to carry a child. Now, the term overweight actually just simply means that there's excess body weight compared to size and stature, so how big your body frame is. Over fat, however, means that there are extremely high percentages of fat within that body weight. And then obesity is an extreme amount of excessive fat. Females with more than 30% fat and males more than 20% fat, we tend to start to qualify as obese. Not talking about BMI values, percentages of fat. Now, there are some things that can determine the amount of fat. Could be the number of cells. So that can come from birth to puberty as far as how many. Could be the size of the cells. That can increase and decrease over time. That has to do with your caloric balance. So what are you taking in versus what are you burning? Now, change of weight is the change in the size of the adipose or fat cells, not the number of cells. So when you lose weight, you're not actually losing fat cells, they're getting smaller. And just for reference, you cannot turn muscle into fat. You can change the size of the fat cells smaller and increase muscle mass, but muscle cells and fat cells cannot become one another. They are two completely different things. Adipose cells store the triglycerides, which was a type of fat. That's a liquid fat, okay? So it moves in and out of cells depending on your energy demand. So if you're doing an activity that's burning fat as fuel, then they're obviously going to be moving out of your cells. Versus if you've taken in an excessive amount, they're going to be moving into cells for storage. Moderate long-term activity uses the most amount of fat. Long distance running, cycling, things that are going on for moderate to long amounts of time. And a very, very key thing here, 1 pound of fat is 3,500 calories. Okay. So if you want to lose 1 pound of fat in a week, then you need to cut your calories you take in every day 500, because 500 times 7 is 3,500 calories. If you want to lose 2 pounds a week, you would cut more. Okay. 3,500 calories is 1 pound. That's how you determine how much weight you want to lose, or how many calories you need to stop taking in to lose weight. Now, when we assess body composition, lots of different ways. Hydrostatic weighing, bioelectrical impedance, skin fold thickness, those are all typical ways. BMI is a way that a lot of people have used for a long time because it's a simple formula that takes into account height and weight. However, it is not very accurate. Hydrostatic weighing is a type of weighing that occurs underwater, in which you sit on a scale underwater, blow all the air out of your lungs, and then sit on the scale to get weighed. Bioelectrical impedance, a lot of y'all have done this. It's a little handheld device. You hold it out between your hands after you've programmed some info in, and it travels through your body, through the water content in your body to determine things. And then skin fold measurements. We've got an image displaying these, but essentially it is a measuring caliber that measures fat, because more than 50% of body fat is subcutaneous, which means it lies just below the skin. So we use skin fold calipers. That's what these things are called. They look painful. They're not painful at all. Relatively low accuracy, but they're very easily to learn and utilize. There is some error, but you need to know what you're doing to use this and it be effective. This is what those calipers look like. And so depending upon whether you're measuring male or female, you pinch the skin, and you have to learn to tell the difference between pinching skin and fat versus muscle. You measure, you pinch these down, and you can see in this image here especially, there's a little gauge there, and it tells you what that measurement is, and then there's a formula that you put that into. Oh, hydrostatic weighing, I mentioned this just a minute ago. Underwater tank has your bone density, or excuse me, not bone, body density. It establishes a very good relationship between lean mass and fat mass. Fat likes to float, whereas lean mass is more dense. It's extremely accurate. However, it's very expensive equipment. A lot of places don't have it. I had the pleasure of being able to actually do this myself, like when I was learning. The University of Arkansas at the time had a hydrostatic weighing chamber. I'm not sure if they still do. It's a tiny bit scary, especially if you're not comfortable in the water, and the fact that you have to blow all the air out. It is a bit time consuming. I think we had to do it 3 to 5 times to get an accurate measurement. Electrical impedance, yet again, I mentioned this. It measures the resistance of electrical current to flow between points. So typically, like I said, it kind of looks like a game controller that you hold in your hands. Electricity flows through the path of least resistance. You don't feel anything. You just hold this thing. Fat is a very good insulator. Water is a good conductor. So that is why this is very easy to use. However, if you are underhydrated, not effective. And then it says it's expensive equipment. However, almost every school I've ever worked at has had at least a simple version of a bioelectrical impedance machine. I'm sure there are much more elaborate ones, but the handheld ones, almost every school I've been at has had one. Body mass index. This is our BMI. Okay, this is our BMI numbers. They determine the extent of overweight or obesity using height and body weight. We really don't like doing this. A lot of people go off of this, though. Doctors still figure this. Typically, though, if it is more than 25, it indicates excess body fat. 25 to 30 indicates overweight, and a BMI of more than 30 indicates obesity. And then when we are trying to break down your caloric balance, that is a very, very simple equation. How many calories are you eating minus how many calories have you expended? This formula actually showed up when you were doing your food journals, your FitnessPal. It would show you how much you had taken in. It would subtract if you logged any activity, so that it would show you that you still had more, like it would give you more back. If I've eaten 1,800 calories, but I ran 5 miles and that burned 750 calories, it would subtract that off and I'd get those back essentially. So we have to take into account not just what we take in, but also what we are using. So if we have a positive caloric balance, then we're going to end up gaining weight. Whereas if we have a negative caloric balance, we burn more than we take in, then we're going to end up losing weight. Okay, so we've got, and the only way to understand what your caloric balance is and to address it is to keep food journals. Okay, tons of different ways to do this nowadays. There are Excel sheets, there are websites, there are apps, so many different ways. Okay, there are also dietitians, there are sports dietitians. This is their entire job, is to figure out what is your caloric intake in a very scientific manner, and then to help you figure out how to keep that balance to do whatever your goal is. Now, you do have some different ways that we use up our calories. One of them is called the basal metabolic rate. This is when you are just resting, chilling, relaxing. What is your natural metabolism? How much calories are being used? Then you've got work, obviously, activities that require more energy than sleeping. And then you've got exertion. So think about like practice, conditioning, things of that nature. Work, I like to think about housework when I think of that category. You also have to calculate the total time that you are engaged in those activities over 24 hours. Basal metabolic rate, though, that's typically determined in a lab setting. They have to do calorimetry, oxygen uptake. It's a very scientific thing. You're not just going to know what your basal metabolic rate is. Work, it has to be the type, intensity, and duration. And then energy expenditures can also be broken down in kilocalories per minute per pound. And I've seen some books in the past that break down, like by sports, how much you typically on average use. Swimming and soccer tend to come in at the very top of those lists. So here's the breakdown of how we figure out what type of calories you're bringing in. Okay. Carbs are 4 calories per gram. Protein is also 4 calories per gram. Fat is 9 calories. That's why the more fatty the food, the more it does to the body. That's why you pack on fat. But that's also why it's a really great fuel source, because it's got 9 calories per every gram, whereas the others have only 4. Alcohol has 7 calories per gram. And then on average, college athletes consume 2,000 to 5,000 calories per day. According to normal life, 2,000 calories a day is average for an average human being. Now, endurance athletes may consume more like 7,000 calories a day. If any of y'all looked at Michael Phelps when we did that calorie intake worksheet, during his Olympic training time, he took in 10,000 calories a day. 10,000 calories. Most of you probably on average bring in anywhere from 15 to probably 2,700 calories. He was bringing in 10,000. Just imagine the amount of food he was having to eat. Now, when it comes to weight loss, you can exercise or diet just by itself, but overall that's not effective. Now, dieting gives you big time results in losing body mass, okay? But you should never drop below 1,000 to 1,200 calories for women and 1,200 to 1,500 calories for men. You drop below that and your body's not bringing in enough for your brain to function right and all of your organs to function right. Exercising results in a loss of fat mass, but it's going to do better because it's going to increase strength, cardio endurance, flexibility. We've already covered that chapter. We know what good stuff exercising does for us. They are most effective when combined, dieting plus exercise. However, if you are only exercising and your goal is to lose weight, you will never see the results you want unless you start dieting, because the old crazy saying, abs are made in the kitchen, not the gym, that's true. What you eat affects your body fat more so than just your exercise. Moderation is the big thing. I tell everybody, my opinion on all of this is that moderation is everything in moderation, including moderation. Combination of diet and exercise. You have to have a negative energy balance. 1.5 to 2 pounds per week is all that you are supposed to be losing at a time. If you're losing more than 4 to 5 pounds a week, it can actually be contributed to dehydration and can be very bad for you. Now, it takes a lot longer to put weight on than it does to take it off. Okay? So if your goal is to gain weight, know that you're still only going to get 1.5 to 2 pounds. Okay. You're not going to get it as fast as you think you are. It takes a lot of work and a lot of food intake. So when we're trying to gain weight, you should be trying to increase lean body mass. You're increasing the physical activity or how much you're working your muscles, which means you'll have to change your diet modifications. Roughly 2,500 calories is required to put on a pound of lean body mass. So 500 to 1,000 calories per day. Yet again, 1 to 2 pounds per week is all you're going to get. You're going to be bringing in more carbs and proteins than you are fats, but it's slow. It's going to take time and it's going to take a lot of physical work to do so. Physical activity, exercise. Now, we're going to enter into a whole other category called disordered eating. Okay, I'm going to warn you now. We are not going to go into these extremely aggressively. We will do that when we get to the psychology unit because these are a psychological condition. However, we are going to go over the qualities as well as the definitions of these conditions. Okay, so disordered eating is actually a spectrum of abnormal eating habits. That means that you can be anywhere on the spectrum, just like with autism. There are different levels, there are different severities. Now, it can be everything from mild food restriction, binging, purging, bulimia, anorexia. There's a lot of different ones other than just those. They also take into account a lot of things: social life, your family life, your physiological health, so your body, your psychological health, though, is a much bigger part of it. Now, we do see a lot of disordered eating in athletic populations. Most athletes have a very strong idea of what body weight and composition they need for their performance. It also has a lot to do with what type of clothing do they wear when they're exercising. So think about swimmers, think about gymnasts, think about wrestlers. Their attire is much more revealing. Therefore, we do see more of an issue with body weight in those sports. Dancing as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave that out. Dancing as well. So we've got emotional and social pressures. Physiological effects obviously are actually going to negatively affect health and performance. And so it's a really big area that athletic trainers are educated in because we are typically the first ones to see it, to recognize it, to realize that the person needs help. Okay. So we try and teach prevention as well as being able to identify and help to manage these conditions. Now, we're going to go over just some of the basics for these. Bulimia nervosa, typically seen in females. However, these can all happen to men, anywhere from adolescence to middle age. These are periods of starvation followed by binging, which is taking in thousands of calories. I'm not just talking like, oh, I had a couple Oreos. I'm talking about I had 2 bags of Oreos, plus ice cream, plus chips, plus all this. Thousands of calories, and then purging. Now, purging can be done through many different ways: vomiting, fasting, laxatives, and diuretics. Purging just means you're ridding your body of anything that you took in. Now, our bulimia nervosa patients have some typical characteristics: white, middle to upper middle class, perfectionist, obedient, compliant, highly motivated, successful, well-liked, good athletes. They are your ultimate perfectionists to a fault. We see them a lot in gymnastics, track, and dance. Male gymnasts and wrestlers are also common where we see this condition. Typically, binging and purging can, in the extreme, rupture your stomach, can affect heart rhythms, liver damage, big time mouth problems, tooth decay, gums inflamed, throat issues, all kinds because purging, vomiting is the most common. Binging does not include celebratory overeating that can happen during holidays or special events. That's not the same thing as what these binges would be. Okay. Binging is defined as a loss of control over one's eating. The result, guilt, drives the person to, that really shouldn't say vomit, it should say to purge. Purging can occur in lots of different ways. then what happens is this pattern gets repeated. Okay, it happens again. Now, anorexia nervosa, 30 to 50% of anorexics will also suffer from bulimia, so they tend to go hand in hand. Typically, there is a very distorted body image with this and a fear of weight gain. Distorted body image means that when you look in the mirror, what you see is not actually what you look like. This is one of those reasons why I tell people most people don't realize how much of a psychological condition disordered eating is. Anorexia is most often affecting females. It starts in adolescence, can be extremely life-threatening. It can take individuals' lives. They tend to be extremely thin, but they continue to feel fat and only see themselves as such. Characteristically, they deny hunger. They're extremely hyperactive, always exercising and not laying around. They're also very secretive. Treatment-wise, got to catch this early. That's the case with any eating disorder, but it needs to be caught early. You have to be empathetic, not sympathy. They don't need a pity party. They need empathy. And then psychological counseling is a must, okay? Individuals need to recognize the problem. They have to accept that they need the help, and then they have to voluntarily work towards it. Anorexia athletica. So this is specific to athletes only. Lots of features are common in anorexia. However, they're not self-starving. Typically, the signs we see here are disturbance of body image, weight loss more than 5% of body weight, GI complaints, and then they lose their period. That's what amenorrhea means. They have lost their menstruation. So yet again, menstrual dysfunction, they are not sick. Okay, so like if you get the flu and you lost, I don't know, 13 pounds because you've been puking your guts up for a week, that's not the same thing. Okay, you were sick. This is no illness to explain the sudden weight loss. They also have an extreme fear of becoming obese, even though they are very, very, very far from that. Binging, purging, compulsive eating, or extreme calorie restriction. So I actually dealt with a patient once that had this, and hers was very much all about journaling her food and what she had had and what she had taken in. I mean, it was insane how detailed she was and how strict she was with it. And then to go along with these disordered eatings, we need to talk about the female athlete triad. This is a fatal condition. Can be, I guess I should say, it doesn't have to be, but it is a combination of three things. They have to have all three: an eating disorder, amenorrhea or loss of a period, and osteoporosis. There has been the suggestion that eating disorders exist in upwards of 62% of females in certain sports, and then amenorrhea found in 60% of those. Huge risk factor is that the bone loss. Okay, you cannot always get back what is lost through osteoporosis. You just can't. It cannot happen. And then so this really is the issue. This is the condition. This is why we deal with eating disorders in this unit, is because of the female athlete triad. Like I said, we will more in depth revisit eating disorders when we get to our psychology unit. But that ends our nutrition unit.